Well, Brendan Ciaran Browne joins us now, an assistant professor on conflict resolution and reconciliation at Trinity College Dublin. Ciaran, thank you so much for your time. In a strange kind of way, isn't this already some kind of victory for Hamas just because of what's happened so far?
Well, thanks again for having me on. It feels like Groundhog Day often when I speak to you. I mean, it's a truly momentous and quite a incredible moment, really. My phone's been non-stop all morning from Palestinian friends and colleagues in Palestine who haven't seen anything like this that they can recall for a long time. And I think we need to really front end this and say very clearly that the Gaza Strip has been under siege for the best part of 15 years. And what that means is essentially every aspect of Palestinian life is controlled by the occupation. And so this really shouldn't come as much of a surprise to anyone. I mean, what do you expect people to do when their entire lives and livelihoods are being destroyed by this? I mean, your infographic there was, again, particularly stark. So this has been brewing and growing, and this is the everyday reality for Palestinians struggling to live a life under this apartheid occupation.
Do you think that, therefore, based on everything you've said in the 15-year blockade, that's about the time that Hamas has been in control of Gaza, that because of what's happening today and right now, it could be a game-changing moment? If Hamas is insisting there isn't, enough is enough, and it's launched this huge assault and thousands of rockets, that there's something in the moment today that is going to change the future?
Look, these things are extremely fluid, okay? And we have to wait and see what way the rest of the West Bank engages. We have to wait and see the way Palestinian citizens in Israel respond to this. And of course, we have to see what way the wider region responds. It's a very fluid situation. So making any kind of predictions as to what may come after this is extremely futile, I think. I mean, at the end of the day, that's not taking away from how seismic this is. To see Palestinian liberation fighters inside settlements in Israel is quite incredible, really. So the next few days will really will determine what way this goes. Now, again, we have to be very clear here that the brunt of the response will be borne by innocent civilians in the Gaza Strip who have paid the most awful price for this illegal, awful apartheid regime up until this point. So, I mean, there's no glory in watching civilians and young children to die during conflict. So that's horrible. So it remains to be seen what way this goes.
Yeah, and regarding the civilians, because of the lives that they live inside Gaza, does that give Hamas some sort of greater leeway in terms of any aggression like it's exerting right now? But does it give Hamas that kind of almost permission? Because the people have been subjugated so much that, you know what, it's a really horrible thing to say, Ciaran, but someone said to me 10 years ago, you don't understand. Living like a Palestinian in Gaza is living a life worse than that of a dog. And I was trying to understand what it must be like, but I don't think anybody can unless they're actually Gazan.
No, I don't think we can. And we can listen to our colleagues and our comrades in Palestine tell us about the living conditions in Gaza, and we can despair. I mean, having things like your calories counted to make sure that you're just kept at a level of life, not being able to travel, having your scholarships denied when you get opportunities to go abroad, not being able to see family members, not being able to return home. I mean, the charge list is limitless. Some people refer to it as the biggest open-air prison in the world. But the reality is this is even worse than that. This is worse than a prison. So, I mean, what do you expect to happen when people are treated like this and when people are subjugated in this way? You have to appreciate the right of a people under this type of living condition to rise up, which is their legitimate right. Remember, this is the legitimate right of people who live under colonial conditions, have the right to resist by any and all means necessary. And we should really make sure that we front end any conversation about what's happening on the ground now by letting people know that over and over again.
And regarding the internal reaction in Israel, Ciaran, what do you think it's largely going to be? Because obviously the right-wing coalition that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, leads, it's not very popular with a large section of the population because of what it's trying to do and reform the judiciary. But in terms of keeping the people safe, will the Israelis be able to separate those two things? Or will Netanyahu, rather than just attack and attack hard, have to actually maybe restrain himself in terms of his personal desire to respond to these attacks by Hamas, just because of political feeling inside Israel?
Well, look, it's clear that Netanyahu in the past hasn't been too worried about showing restraint. I mean, you ask people who've lived in Gaza what restraint looks like from Netanyahu. Now, on saying that, this government is clearly one of the most fascist right-wing governments we've seen in Israel for a long time. And again, there will be a push and a demand for a strong retaliation. And even we saw this morning that some of the protests that were supposedly demanding, that democracy in Israel, whatever that looks like, gets protected. Those protests were cancelled this morning in light of this. So, again, there's going to be a lot of tension, a lot of internal fractions at the moment, and figuring out what the next steps are. And as your reporter mentioned previously, I mean, taking 40 or 50, and those numbers we don't know yet, Israeli soldiers hostage, and whether they're civilians as well, that's to be confirmed, is a really significant bargaining chip, let's say, on behalf of Hamas, who will hope that they can use this as leverage to try and make some gains. Now, let's be real, the only reasonable outcome here in this space is an end to the occupation, is an end to the apartheid regime, is a crumbling of the systematic oppression that Palestinians feel and experience on a day-to-day basis. Anything short of that is unacceptable. And as international comrades and the international community in general, we need to be urging our politicians to challenge the language that they use and to really put pressure on the Israeli government to end this.
Yeah, we'll have to wait to see how those hostages that Hamas says it's taken and releasing video footage on its social media accounts affects any sort of negotiations between the two sides. About the Palestinian Authority, do you think that it's been weakened by this sort of action? I mean, many people have been saying for months, maybe years, that Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, is not in touch with the Palestinian street sentiment, you could say. And that's why there's been so much trouble, especially in the occupied West Bank, between Israeli security forces and, well, Palestinians with guns who want to take the fight to Israel.
Yeah, I mean, anybody with any understanding of the way the PA has been established and the role that the PA has played over the years in terms of propping up the occupation, in terms of security sharing of information, and ensuring that the Palestinian, those who are interested in rising up, are suppressed. Anybody who knows anything about the PA is not expecting anything from them. They're so chronically out of touch with the reality on the ground. Like the Palestinian population have no love for the PA whatsoever. But again, they're in a rock and a hard place now in terms of how they respond to this. I mean, they are completely, in many ways, largely irrelevant, because the people on the street, as you mentioned, have no love or support for the Palestinian Authority.
Right. The Magen David Adom Emergency Medical Service says in a statement that 22 people in Israel so far have been shot dead by Palestinian gunmen. So clearly those fights and exchanges of fire in Israel and around the Gaza Strip are still continuing. Sorry, I've been calling you Ciaran the whole time. Maybe I should have been calling you Brendan. Just finally, Brendan, if you don't mind, surely this thing can't last too long, simply because of the imbalance in terms of the military strength of the two sides.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. You've got, on the one hand, you've got a Western-sponsored nuclear-armed superpower with one of the largest military mights in the world versus a resistance movement who are using everything that they can to make strikes, and quite significant strikes. I don't know if you've seen some of the images coming out of some of the resistance fighters' videos to show attacking tanks and whatever with their own weaponry. So yes, there is a chronic imbalance, but I suspect that this won't just disappear in the next few days. I mean, as your reporter mentioned earlier, I would fully expect that there will be ground troops sent in, and that is going to get extremely dangerous and extremely ugly. So again, as I mentioned before in our conversation, it remains also to be seen what way the West Bank rises up and Palestinian citizens inside Israel, and then certainly in the wider region as well.
All right, Brendan, Ciaran Browne, thank you so much indeed. Really, really appreciate it speaking to us from, you're in Belfast. Thank you so much, Brendan. Take care.
Thank you. Cheers.